Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, well, aging. We often suggest that key factors for aging well include exercise, physical activity, maintaining a healthy body composition, eating a healthy diet, and of course, not smoking. But what about alcohol? In this episode, we address the role of alcohol in aging well. Specifically, we address the question posed by a listener about our recommendations for reducing and/or eliminating alcohol for aging well.
We got an email from a listener by the name of Jodie K. Jodie asks, I'm curious as to why your recommendations for aging well don't include reducing or eliminating alcohol. So many people increase their consumption or frequency of drinking as they age. With children grown or in retirement and sleep challenges, people tend to drink increased amounts of wine, which interrupts sleep cycles, provides empty calories and sugar, and alcohol has been shown to be a carcinogen. People need to learn how to enjoy themselves without alcohol to truly age well. The person who drinks a glass or two of wine or alcohol a week are few and far between. Most drink much more often. So we have not discussed our recommendations for alcohol consumptions as far as aging well, and I thought we could take a shot at it today.
Yeah, so it was an interesting email to get. I think there's a lot of things to kind of tease out in there. I mean, one that really jumped out at me is the idea of it being a carcinogen. I have not seen any evidence of alcohol being carcinogenic, although there's certainly a possibility that some alcohol types and for some situations, some individuals, it may be a carcinogen. There are so many carcinogens out there, and that may be something we tackle in another episode too in terms of carcinogens and aging and those types of things, because just because something is a carcinogen does not mean that it necessarily leads to cancer. And then again, that's part of the role of exercise in minimizing some of those risks. But there are many things to kind of tease out in that. And so where do you want to start?
Well, often we suggest that the key factors of aging well includes exercise, physical activity, maintaining a healthy body composition, eating a healthy diet, and of course, not smoking. But what about alcohol? What does the research say?
Well, it is interesting. There's a lot of research that's out there, and some of it is a bit mixed. The data are very complicated. I think it's interesting to look at where some of the studies have come from, what they have considered. There's a number of factors that you might want to consider. I mean, obviously one is genetics. And several of the studies that I was looking at, there's been a number of recent studies coming out of Korea, some out of Japan. So when you look at ethnicities and genetics, there's a lot of differences among populations that will affect how we metabolize alcohol, how alcohol affects our bodies. And so that needs to be considered. And so certainly as we look at ourselves, what is our family history with alcohol abuse, and the ill effects of alcohol? I mean, if you have family history of cirrhosis of the liver because of alcohol consumption, considering your alcohol consumption might be an important thing to do. The quantity and the frequency of alcohol consumption is important. How much are we drinking on a daily basis? How much are we drinking on a weekly basis? And, how much is that being consumed in a short period of time? We hear many college students binge drinking. That's, I think, 6 to 7 drinks within a couple hour span of time. How frequently is that done? Because a lot of the surveys that I've taken over the years, they say, they will basically say that if you have consumed that many, you're a binge drinker. Well, if you only do it once, you're really a binge drinker. It's the habitual nature of how often some of that stuff is being done, the impact that that's going to have. The type of alcohol consumed. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how we can maybe make better choices if we are going to consume alcohol to be able to age well. And as well, there's a lot of other health habits that are complicated or complicate the alcohol consumption that we can talk about as well. Alcohol intoxication, which again, that should be a lot more the consideration. It's not necessarily alcohol consumption in many cases. It's alcohol intoxication. It's drinking beyond that level of moderation. But it is known to activate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and that can result in higher levels of our stress hormones. And we'll link several studies in the discussion notes so that some of these studies that we talk about, one can read a little bit more about those if they wish to. But this promotes what may be described as kind of a three-way interaction between alcohol, cortisol secretion, and the aging process. And so when we are drinking alcohol and we are aging and we are under stress, that can have quite a bit of an effect on the aging process. And so it isn't just the one factor or the other that is impacting the ill effects of alcohol. It's a lot of combined effects of our lifestyle, our dietary habits, our exercise habits, our physical activity habits, family history, genetics, all those types of things all work together. And we know also that moderate alcohol consumption has been shown to carry many health benefits. More and more research has been coming out lately that a glass of wine a day or certain types of beers can have positive effects physiologically. And we might have mentioned some of that in previous podcasts. I think we might have at one point mentioned the article talking about how one article stated that a glass of wine is equivalent to an hour at the gym. Now, certainly we're going to come back to that one because we do have quite a few things to say about that.
Right.
But when we look at a lot of the studies, there is a bit of that U-shaped effect, that relationship between alcohol consumption and physical health. Many researchers have kind of revealed a U-shape to that, similar to what we've talked about, like Neiman's J and the J-shape effect of exercise on immune function, the J-shape of BMI on immune system function and COVID and some of those things that we've talked about. And so there's probably a bit of that U or J-shape function with drinking alcohol as well. And so while a light to moderate consumption may have an effect of reducing certain health issues, health problems, so, chronic heavy drinking is certainly linked to increased risk of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, and increased mortality rates. And so when we talk about alcohol, it's not necessarily an all or nothing proposition. There is some benefits to small levels of consumption, but again, we're not in presenting that data saying that if you don't drink, you should start drinking. And we're also not saying, I don't think we'll be saying that, if you do drink, you should totally abstain from drinking. We need to take this in the very broad, nuanced approach to the effects of alcohol on, aging.
I think that's kind of a little bit of a challenge, though, don't you think? Especially with what she was saying is the people that drink just one or two drinks is far and few between. And I don't know, maybe she's living in an area such as the Midwest where it's like a cultural thing to go right out to the bar and drink and consume a lot more. What do you think about?
Well, first of all, I lived in the Midwest, and I resent that stereotype or that that presumption that the people in the Midwest just go out to the bars drinking all the time. I think that's pretty universal.
Is it?
I don't think it's any different here in the Northwest.
But do you think age and demographic also? Because obviously people in their 20s or, as you mentioned, college age. I mean, that's kind of more of the social norms is to consume more alcohol.
Again, but that's not limited to the Midwest.
It's not, well,
it's
that's
limited to, demographics. I think there, and several of the articles that we will share do mention things in regards to like lower economic status tends to have higher incidence of high alcohol consumption. So education, economics, again, social status, where you live, family history, even the level of stress in the home environment or in the work environment can have an impact on alcohol consumptions. And so everybody's going to be a little bit different. And what we have to do is, as individuals, as communities, we have to recognize the situations that are causing or creating health issues as a result of alcohol consumption. And certainly, I mean, colleges, I don't know if it's still the same. I went to West Virginia University in the era when it was the number one party school in the country, to the state that it was no longer ranked because the magazine that ranked the party schools didn't want to rank professionals. And but so there was, I wouldn't say pressure to consume more alcohol, but there was much more opportunity to consume more alcohol. But for myself and for many of the people that I went to school with, those behaviors didn't necessarily continue beyond, college. And it was, to me, and at least in my experience, it was much more balanced around our academics. So again, every situation is going to be a little bit different. And so when we discuss alcohol consumption, we have to consider what other activities, what other habits are surrounding that alcohol consumption as well, in order to really get an adequate picture of how it's going to impact health. And I think it's important to discuss the interaction between exercise, alcohol, and sleep. There was a study by Lee, Yu, Choi, and Choi that was published in 2021. The title of it is "To Drink or to Exercise, That Is," and in parentheses, not, parentheses, and the question, daily effects of alcohol consumption and exercise on well-being. It's actually a really good article that considers the effects of alcohol consumption, exercise, and the interaction of sleep within those variables in affecting one's health and well-being. And we know that alcohol shortens the time to onset of sleep and interferes with sleep quality, and it often results with an individual's waking up in the night having disrupted sleep. And so we don't get good quality of sleep when we're consuming alcohol. And I think a lot of people think that, a nice drink before bed is going to help them sleep.
Nightcap.
And it might get them to sleep faster, but they're going to be sleeping more poorly throughout the night. However, exercise has been associated with improved sleep quality and a better sleep pattern, and has actually been recommended by the American Sleep Disorders Association as a complementary remedy for people that have sleeping disturbances. And so we have to kind of consider how do we balance those all out? And what Lee and others concluded is that those who drink less and exercise tend to be happier, in a better mood, and experience better meaning of life. So exercise, drink a little bit less, maybe don't drink at all, is kind of the general outcome, I think, of most of the literature that is out there.
Does it say what specific type of exercise? Like, are they focusing more resistance training, or are they focusing more cardio style, or does it matter? Or is it just get active, be exercise, watch yourself hit a better night's sleep, all in all?
That's one of the kind of interesting aspects of how the research is done when it comes to exercise. I think most of the literature is very poor in terms of its choices of trying to identify what type of exercise is going to be the most effective. In often cases, it's just exercise in general. There's no distinction between resistance training and cardiovascular exercise. There have been some studies that have kind of looked at it. And I think if you look at, and there's actually a paper, considerations for maximizing the exercise, quote, drug, unquote, to combat insulin resistance, the role of nutrition, sleep, and alcohol. This is published in Nutrients. And again, we'll link this article. They talk about exercise as a drug relative to a sedentary lifestyle. And, we know that if we're sedentary, we're going to tend to have less glucose uptake, tends to see less muscle mass, more sarcopenia, less fat oxidation, which means that we are increasing our fat content in the body. So body fat content goes up. We see a decrease in the effectiveness of insulin, tending for more circulating free fatty acids. You have, when we look at the vasculature, VO2 goes down. There's more damage to the epithelial tissue in the vessels. Sleep is affected. We see more sleep apnea, more insulin being secreted during sleep, increased glucose in the blood during sleep, increased free fatty acids in the blood. Liver function is more impaired. And then when you compound that with alcohol consumption, so a sedentary lifestyle and alcohol is going to tend to take away from exercise activity, right? Because you're drunk, you're not going to be going to the gym, right? Or, if you're going out and, again, we talk about opportunity cost a lot on this podcast, right? And you have that same 24 hours. And if you have a choice, and I've mentioned this probably in one of the classes that you had as a student with me, but I mention it often to students that, if you are, getting ready to go to the gym and your roommates come in with a 12-pack of beer and some pizza, you have a choice to make. Do I stay and drink the beer, or do I go to the gym? And depending on that choice is going to have an outcome, that's going to be more favorable or less favorable. And so if we are not exercising, we're consuming more alcohol, there's, again, less motivation to exercise. Or it's more of a binge type of exercise. Like, we tied one on last night. I got to go to the gym and work it off. And you don't train as hard. You might go through the motions of exercising, but you don't get quite the benefits. But when we're exercising on a regular basis, we reverse much of that. And we can do either aerobic exercise or resistance exercise. But obviously, the more favorable approach is going to be to do a combination of the two, because we want to get some cardiovascular benefit and we want to build the skeletal muscles, because as we've talked about repeatedly, averting that muscle sarcopenia, the muscle loss that comes with inactivity and even doing excessive amounts of cardiovascular exercise, we lose muscle, we can't do as much activity, and so we become less and less active. And so while the literature doesn't really address it directly, at least much of the literature that I've seen, I think a greater emphasis needs to be on the resistance training with enough cardiovascular to maintain and improve VO2 max, but generally at least some balance between the two, if not favoring resistance training more so than cardiovascular. That answer your question?
Well, yeah. And it kind of makes sense as far as getting like a hybrid, especially if you're adding the resistance training. You're firing more motor neurons throughout the entire body. And so the importance of having your body hit that reset button in order to recover, it makes sense to hit that deeper amount of sleep versus consuming alcohol. Essentially, you're putting a poison into your body. So your body's in overdrive trying to break down the alcohol itself and get that poison out. So it does make sense, theoretically, of course, on just exercise more, and you're going to hit far greater levels of sleep versus, consuming that nightcap of that evening cocktail or whatever, and then not getting as good at a night's rest.
Yeah. So whether you drink or don't drink, exercise is going to be a critical factor in terms of aging well.
Right.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
You did mention how people have a choice. as far as drinking that 12 pack and eating that pizza or going to the gym. And a lot of people, they try and balance the two out. They try and balance their calories or their macros. And they're like, well, if I eat this or I drink that, then I have to burn X amount. But what a lot of people don't realize is that alcohol actually has a different level of calories versus carbs, fats, and proteins. Carbs and proteins are 5 kilocalories, fats are 9, but alcohol is in that 7 range, correct?
Carbs and proteins are 4, but yes.
Okay. I thought we could talk about that because it kind of, it's okay. Never mind.
Well,
Moving on.
I mean, it's like you said, people don't tend to count it into their macros.
Right.
And so it often gets ignored and those calories don't get counted. And that leads to kind of an excessive amount of fat gain as a result. But more often than not, the biggest concern with alcohol consumption and weight management is the fact that as we consume alcohol, not only are there more calories in the alcohol, but we tend to have greater hunger and a reduced satiety. And so we're more likely to eat more when we are consuming alcohol. And so those calories magnify. And if you're drinking to a point where you're becoming a bit more inebriated, you have a little less control over your consumption of calories, and you have less sense of counting those calories as well. You're less inhibited as you are consuming alcohol, and so those calories may cause more calories to be consumed.
So it seems to me that the overall goal is just to be active and exercise more, and you're going to hit that deeper level of sleep. You're going to feel more rested, which, we've talked about in the past that the more exercise you get, not only are you going to get a better night's sleep, you're also going to have significant effects on your immune system. So what are some of the side effects that consuming alcohol might have on the immune system, and how does that differ?
Well, I've talked about inflammaging in several of the different podcasts, and in a recent paper, it's titled "Alcohol, Aging, and Innate Immunity" that was published in the Journal of Leukocyte Biology, Boyle and Kovacs, it's a 2017 article, suggests that the evidence that exists to date suggests that alcohol ingestion may translate to weakened initiation of immunity and immunological memory in the elderly. And so when we are consuming alcohol, we are having much of the same effects that we see that result from just kind of the normal aging process. And so those can be compounded when we combine the fact that as we are aging and we are consuming alcohol, those two factors are going to have a more magnifying effect on decreasing the immune system function. And so as we advance in age and as we are consuming alcohol, we are having a profound effect on the immune system, particularly innate immune system cells. And so one and the other individually are having a negative effect. Combine those, it's going to even have a greater effect.
So what do you think about COVID, though? Because during the COVID pandemic, when I recall driving down the road and seeing people have their red recycling bins out on recycling day. And you notice that those particular red bins were filled with a lot more wine bottles or hard spirit bottles or whatever the case may be. So obviously people were consuming higher levels of alcohol. Now, whether that was from the myth of if I drink more, it's going to help me sleep, or maybe I'm just going to drink because I don't have any responsibilities tomorrow, so I'm just going to let loose and enjoy myself. Or maybe it was also a coping mechanism in order to deal with a lot of the stress and anxiety that COVID, the whole pandemic kind of caused the world to have. And so do you think by people consuming alcohol, do you think it has to do with either the time of their life or a cultural effect or whatever the case may be? But there's obviously reasons where people drink higher amounts than normal.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's certainly times when we're going to tend to drink more. I mean, we've talked about kind of the college years being a kind of era in our lives where we tend to consume more alcohol, or many people tend to consume more alcohol. There are social events that are tied to more alcohol being consumed, weddings. And, we are recording this on New Year's Eve, the morning before New Year's Eve. And there are many people who feel the need to consume high alcohol content to celebrate the new year. I personally will still be in bed maybe I'll stay up a little bit later tonight and, be past my bedtime till about 10 o'clock. But COVID was a unique period of time. And I think there's still probably studies that are to come out in regards to alcohol consumption and things like that. But it has been well documented that alcohol sales were much higher during COVID. And why that occurred, again, that's going to be probably fairly individualized. Many people were probably consuming more to cope. Many were probably consuming more just because of accessibility or lack of things to do otherwise. And so, yeah, it was a bad time for alcohol consumption. And hopefully people have not picked up habits during that period of time that they're carrying on now, if we can call it post-COVID, that will cause them to have a more alcohol consumption going forward, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So what about this notion? I think we've mentioned it before. There was a article that came out a while back that reported from one study, and it was a very poorly worded paper, and the study itself was not that great of a study, but it basically reported that a glass of wine is equivalent to an hour at the gym. What do you think about that?
I remember we did that podcast and we were both cracking up afterwards because, yeah, there are quote unquote benefits of it, but it's few and far between, and you can't beat what actually takes place when you go to the gym and you put in the work and you actually exercise. Like taking a glass of wine, it can be relaxing. It can be, but it's way different. And the long-term benefits, of course, of actually putting in the effort to work out is way greater than I'm just going to sip on this glass of wine and relax and pretend that it's giving me a whole boost of cardiovascular activity.
Well, I mean, the benefits are there. They're fairly well documented that a glass of wine and even, to a certain extent, a glass of beer may have an immediate effect very similar to what effect we get out of exercise. We see, decreases in blood pressure. We see, a few metabolic types of effects and things like that can be very similar to the results that we get from going to the gym. But I think the biggest issue there is, what are you not doing when you are consuming that glass of wine? You are not burning calories. You are not stimulating muscle hypertrophy. You are not affecting the heart function in order to increase stroke volume or at the cellular level, increase arteriovenous oxygen difference. And so you're not really getting the benefits long-term of going to the gym. And so hopefully people, if they see that does not cause them to not go to the gym. I think if you take that research from the viewpoint of the effects, the benefits physiologically, then you might be able to conclude that glass of wine consumed once a day, say maybe you have a glass of wine at dinner or something like that, it's going to have some benefits that will complement what we can get from the gym. It's not substituting the gym. It, in many ways, requires a little bit more activity at the gym because we want to counter those wasted, empty calories. In Jodie's questions, she talked about the empty calories that come from alcohol. Alcohol gives us no nutrient value. And so every calorie that we are consuming with regards to alcohol, if we want to be in a negative caloric balance in order to lose body fat, or we want to be in a eucaloric state to be able to maintain a healthy body mass, we got to counter those with some increased level of activity.
I don't know. I will disagree until I'm blue in the face. I don't
disagree with what?
With that article as far as benefits go.
It kind of sounded like you were disagreeing.
No, I know 100% going to agree with you. I don't think that you can get as many benefits from consuming an adult beverage versus going to the gym and putting in the
I wouldn't say you're going to get as many, but you are going to get some benefits.
Yeah.
And that needs to be kind of taken with a figurative grain of salt. There are some benefits in there, and that's where it gets a little bit muddied in terms of making recommendations as to whether or not, somebody, should be consuming alcohol or should not be consuming alcohol for aging well. And we'll kind of come to our recommendations here shortly.
Well, one of the biggest effects that it's going to have on the body consuming alcohol is actually going to be how it affects muscle hypertrophy. So what does the consumption of alcohol do, and how does it affect hypertrophy?
Well, actually, I think the idea that it negatively affects muscle hypertrophy is a bit of a kind of a misleading proposition. I don't think when we are, first of all, exercising properly to stimulate muscle growth and exercising regularly, consuming light to moderate amounts of alcohol, it's not going to have a huge effect on muscle hypertrophy. There's an article that, again, we'll share by Steiner, Gordon, and Lang that concluded that moderate alcohol consumption does not impair muscle growth and therefore implies that resistance exercise may be an effective therapeutic modality for alcohol-related tissue or muscle disease. So if people are drinking, we can counteract that drinking by doing more hypertrophy type activities, resistance training activities that are going to stimulate muscle growth. And so basically what that means is that alcohol is not interfering with the anabolic signaling that stimulates muscle growth. And so, in general, if we are consuming alcohol at a light to moderate level and resistance training, we're not going to see quite the same ill effects. We can still stimulate muscle growth. There has been some belief that alcohol can increase aromatization of the androgens. That is, it can lead to a decrease in anabolic hormones. If you really look at the literature, most of that is tied to really heavy doses of alcohol. So you're a weightlifter, power lifter, bodybuilder, and you're going to the gym, you're working out hard, you're putting a hard effort in the gym, and then you're going out and pounding a 6-pack of beer after the workout. That's going to have a negative effect on your ability to hypertrophy the muscle. And in the Bianco paper, they say, interestingly, in 100% of analyzed studies, an ethanol dose administration greater than 1.5 grams per kilogram showed a decrease in testosterone serum levels. This underlies a dose-dependent physiological mechanism related to ethanol consumption. And in parentheses, assuming that a glass of beer is around 12 ounces or 355 milliliters, and on average, its alcohol content is between 4.5 and 6%. For a 70 kilogram male, this dose would correspond to 5 to 6 glasses of beer. No differences between adolescents and adults were identified. And so again, and then 70 kilograms is about 160 pound male. Most males are much larger than that, particularly those that might be on a regular basis consuming 5 to 6 glasses of beer on a daily basis. And so it takes a large amount of alcohol consumption in order to really have that negative effect on testosterone levels. There are some studies that have been out there, and there's some belief that beer in particular can have an estrogizing effect on the testosterone.
Isn't that because of the hops?
But again, that is much likely dose dependent. And if we stick to more light to moderate consumption, we're probably not going to see those same effects. If you're seeing those effects, then you should be reevaluating your habits and your priorities. And if building muscle mass is a priority, you're a bodybuilder, a physique athlete, it would probably behoove you to not consume alcohol in your training, and particularly as you are nearing a peaking state where, maybe you're trying to get your body composition as low as possible for competition, or you are trying to maximize strength for, say, a powerlifting or a weightlifting event, then decreasing alcohol consumption is going to be pretty sensible. For the average individual who's just looking to, as they age, build a little bit of muscle mass, maintain muscle mass, to moderate alcohol consumption is not going to have quite the ill effects that some might, purport it to have.
So it kind of seems to me the hormone effect alone on consuming alcohol just really kind of shocks the body. We mentioned earlier, obviously it throws off our sleep pattern, which is going to have a huge impact on the body. It throws off the insulin levels throughout the body. It's going to affect ghrelin levels to make us want to consume more calories. It has the potential of throwing off testosterone levels if we're consuming a lot more. And to me, it just doesn't seem like, it almost doesn't seem worth it to even let loose. You know what I mean? And I know every situation is different, but I just feel like going to the gym and dedicating that life to that more healthier style of living, you're going to have way, way better impacts than just kind of, I don't know, just going out and enjoying yourself at a party. I just feel like it's going to retroact all the benefits that you've done as far as that.
You're talking several things there. When you're saying cut loose and enjoying yourself at a party, that again is dose dependent. I mean, yes, I would say from the hormonal standpoint, those hormones, particularly cortisol, is going to be hugely negatively affected by excessive alcohol consumption. And unfortunately, many people who are drinking heavily are drinking so because they're under stress. And so that further compounds that cortisol effect. And so I think something that we have to consider is, why are we drinking and how much are we drinking? Just going out and letting loose and unrestrained alcohol consumption on occasion might not be so detrimental. On a regular basis, it's going to have detrimental effects. And it's certainly going to have a negative effect on our wellness and on our physical performance. And if you're cutting loose, if you're going out and drinking excessive amounts of alcohol, trying to recover from that and then going to the gym the next day to get a beneficial exercise session is going to be much more difficult. And so my first recommendation, and might as well jump into kind of some of what are our recommendations for alcohol consumption for aging well. My first recommendation would be, don't drink alcohol for the purposes of the drug effect of it, from the standpoint of trying to relieve stress, trying to, again, get intoxicated. Don't drink to get intoxicated. Drink, if you're going to drink, like other recommendations we've made in regards to food consumption, if you're going to drink, make it purposeful. Do it to enjoy the taste of a good bottle of wine. Don't go out and buy Boone's Farm strawberry wine to get intoxicated. I don't even know if they make that anymore, but I remember kids drinking that crap in college. You're not drinking rot gut alcohol just to satisfy some addiction to the alcohol or something like that. It would be better to enjoy. We're in the Pacific Northwest, some of the best areas to get good beers and good wines. If you enjoy wine, enjoy it, but not in excess. Enjoy it for the taste, the quality, the experience, the minor health benefits that you get from that one glass of wine, it's going to have a better all effect on your mood and on your well-being. And physiologically, it's probably going to have some level of benefit, more so than it's going to be detrimental. But as we move to multiple glasses of wine or beer, then you're starting to get into some of the negative effects of the alcohol. Personally, I would say stay away from the hard liquor as much as possible. That generally is going to have a much more negative effect because we tend to drink more of it because it's more alcohol per volume, and we're generally drinking it because we want that alcohol effect. I mean, for myself personally, if wine and beer did not have any alcohol, it wouldn't stop me from drinking it. It's just any non-alcoholic beer tastes like crap. And so there's no point in drinking it. I've yet to find a good tasting non-alcoholic beer. And non-alcoholic wine is grape juice, and that's just empty calories. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is kind of interesting. I'm going to get a little personal, but I actually recently have gone on a journey where I am about to hit tomorrow, I will be on 5 months of no drinking whatsoever. I was actually, for the last 2 years, I was having really, really bad liver problems, and I was going in and out of the doctor, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And I really wasn't consuming that much alcohol, but I really personally wasn't doing it. I was doing it more of a social aspect. Like I would drink to drink a good beer to combine with my food, or drink wine to complement my meal or dinner. And I would be a social drinker, but I wasn't going out and going crazy like I was in my younger 20s or my college days, where it was like, let's drink as much as we can, and this is awesome. But whatever the case may be, I was having a lot of liver issues and in and out of the doctor, and they couldn't find anything wrong because I really wasn't consuming. And I went out with some friends on 4th of July and had a couple drinks. And then the next morning I just woke up and I felt absolutely awful. I just felt like garbage. And at that point I was like, okay, no more. I'm just done drinking. And I noticed that my sleep patterns, I'm getting way better night's rest. I'm noticing that my joints throughout my hands, randomly my fingers would just swell up throughout the day, and that stopped. So as far as my recommendation, if you have the luxury and you want to make that choice to not consume alcohol and you want to do that, that would be my choice. But I also agree with you. If you are going to drink in moderation. Don't drink to get drunk. Drink like once a week and have only a couple glasses. Maybe it's a happy hour. Maybe you go out on a Friday with some of your coworkers. Maybe you do a wine tasting event. Maybe you're at a function or a fundraiser and someone hands you an old fashioned. Well, like, stick to one, socialize, but don't make it a part of your daily life, because, as what we've discussed, there's a lot of impacts that alcohol has on us as humans. And so I would say, yeah, exercise and healthy eating is a lot better than the other option.
Well, I would say, you go to that social event and somebody hands you an old fashioned. First of all, just turn it down unless you requested an old fashioned and
Right.
That's your drink of choice. Anytime anybody is handing you a drink and insisting upon drinking, you have a choice there, whether you're going to succumb to the societal pressures or the peer pressure and drink. Do your best to say no, especially if it's an issue for you, whether it's physiologically, psychologically, economically, relationally, whatever. If you're having issues with alcohol, then by all means, you need to stop drinking and you need to get the help to maintain that abstinence. but we shouldn't succumb to pressure.
No.
If you're in a situation where you feel pressure to be drinking, there's a lot of ways to mask it. One of the things that I used to do in parties is, my mixed drink of choice would be a Captain Morgan spiced rum and Coke, because it would just be like I'd put a splash of Captain Morgan in there. So, I couldn't deny that I didn't have alcohol. It's like somebody can't just, oh, you're just drinking Diet Coke. No, it's Captain Morgan rum and Coke. I'm good. And you can kind of nurse that. There's very little alcohol in it. You get a little bit of taste of the alcohol if you like that. But nobody's pressuring you because you have a drink in your hand. Beer becomes a problem when you go to social events because you can't stand there with, an empty glass of beer. Somebody's going to start to fill it, or, wine, any of those. And so in a social situation, it's always helpful to maybe have a drink in your hand, but it doesn't have to be an alcoholic drink. Nobody's going to bother you if they think you're consuming alcohol and they're trying to pressure you to drink. And so try and do something like that in a social setting that's going to limit you from consuming more alcohol.
And I actually think that they do have really good non-alcoholic beer options.
No, there are none.
Yes.
There's absolutely none.
I don't know if we can.
But, it becomes a bit of an acquired taste. I mean, I love, I've talked about dark chocolate. I can't eat regular chocolate anymore because I've gotten so used to eating the healthier dark chocolate. It would be much the same. And if you've been drinking better quality alcohol, if there's such a thing, it becomes harder to drink the bad stuff. And what I've found over the course of my career, in college, my fraternity, the keg beer of choice was Goebbels. We used to call it Jobels to make it sound more classy. Really crappy beer. I could drink all of those more broader branded crappy beers, but as I've matured my palate, and it's become more about tasting the taste experience, not the alcohol, it's a lot harder to go back and drink that other stuff. And so when you need to be able to just drink non-alcoholic beers and you get used to it, that taste, it becomes a better taste for you. And so it is probably a bit more of an acquired taste. And if that's what somebody needs to drink in a social setting in order to, maintain sobriety, like in your case, to maintain better liver health, I still think it's unfortunate the doctors have not figured out what's wrong. Again, by not drinking alcohol, you are treating a symptom, but not necessarily treating the root cause. But if you have liver issues or you have a family history of liver issues and things like that, then certainly abstaining from alcohol makes really good sense. But if you're going to consume, make it worth the while. Do it for the taste, do it for the experience, so go wine tasting, but you don't have to, my wife and I will frequently go wine tasting. We have a couple of wineries that I'm going to give a nice little shameless plug for in the area. I really love Pete's Mountain here in West Lynn, and Twill, which is also in West Lynn. The owners of both of those are friends and really great people. And we just like going there for the experience. And for us, it's kind of a date night. Just go sit. You're consuming maybe about a glass of wine if you're doing a tasting. So it's not a lot of alcohol, but it's that experience and you're tasting it. You're giving yourself some level of pleasure other than getting the pleasure just from the alcohol itself. Beer tasting, the same thing. We just went yesterday. It was pick up a new car up in near Astoria, Oregon. We drove into Astoria and went to Bowie, a brew pub for Bowie Brewing, and just tried a few beers there. We just did one taster between the two of us, probably maybe 8 ounces of alcohol apiece. And, we got that experience. We got to taste it, and it was the experience. It wasn't the alcohol. There was no level of functional impairment that came from it. But, if you're going to do something like that, do it for the right reasons and let it be an enjoyable experience. And definitely kind of do it in moderation. Most recommendations are going to be, for females, no more than probably about 5 to 7 servings of alcoholic beverage, so say 5 to 7 glasses of wine per week. And males, maybe 8 to 10, maybe as much as, 12, but limiting it to certainly less than that.
That's like 2 glasses during the work week.
Right. Yeah. Unless you have an issue with it, and the calories are not a problem, it's not necessarily going to cause ill health. I would lean more toward the 1 per day, but again, limiting that and limiting when you are consuming it. Not having an alcoholic beverage right before bed, not having hard liquor. We're talking about good quality glass of like red wine, where there are, multiple different health benefits associated with it. A good quality beer that you're sipping and experiencing, as opposed to just downing it to relieve the stress of the day or something like that. You might recall, I don't know if I talked about it when you were a student, but probably not, because I think it came up a little bit later. Having moved from the Midwest to the Northwest, we initially, and because we do like the taste of beer, we partook in the Northwest brew experience, and I started gaining weight, and I got in the bod pod in the lab and realized my body composition was higher than I wanted it to be. And so it was time to cut calories and try and lose some body fat. And so one of the first things that we looked at was, what are we consuming in regards to beer, and how can we cut those calories? And so we started looking at the calories in beer and realized that a lot of these IPAs that are the Northwest is known for have a lot of calories in them. And we looked at, there were some beers out there. There was one beer in particular, it was something like Nitro Penguin something stout. I don't know where it was, but it was like 1,000 calories in a pint.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. You're drinking that and you're not aware of the calories that you're consuming. You have a couple of those, you're putting on a lot of weight. Granted, most people are not going to be drinking those 2 or 3 of those a day, but
it's like a meal. I don't know if you can drink 2 or 3 in a day. I'm hungry. I'm full. I'm too full.
Well, some people can, but so what we started looking at is the calorie content in the beer. And my wife came home from grocery shopping with a 6-pack of Michelob Ultra, and those had like 90 calories, I think, in a bottle. And I opened one of those, and it was like, this is horrible. I'm going to abstain from alcohol if this is what I have to drink. It was just, I would not drink it. And so we started looking at, well, okay, what are the calories in beer? And we realized again that the ABV in many of those IPAs was like 7, 8 in some cases. And you get above 8, then you're getting into those imperial IPAs that have even more calories. But I came to a calculation that if you look at the ABVs, there's roughly 40 kilocalories per ABV per pint of beer. And so we've started using that as a gauge to say, okay, well, what beer choice do I want to make to keep the calories lower, and which ones are going to maintain that good taste? And we kind of have come to a conclusion that the sweet spot for a decent tasting beer and relatively lower calories can be between about 4.5 and 5.5 ABV, which essentially kind of puts it in that sessionable category. When we talk about a sessionable beer, and it's something to look for if you're going to be drinking more socially, sessionable means that it's got lower alcohol content. So they're really designed that you can drink more of them without becoming intoxicated, without the excessive calories. But we've since actually found a lot of beers now are below that 4.5 or at maybe 4.5%, but because they cut the carbs, they actually can cut the calories down to fewer than 100 kilocalories per glass of beer, usually it's, per 12 ounce. And they have decent taste to them. You're lower in calories, lower in alcohol, and you can enjoy those without many of the more ill effects of the alcohol. And so I've begun to kind of use that as an example to my students, whereas we're cutting calories, a simple thing is simply reducing the alcohol content of the beer you consume is going to have a multiplying effect. If you go, down just 1% is going to be 40 kilocalories fewer in beer, right? So 40 kilocalories, if you're drinking one beer a day over the course of 365 days, is a lot of calories. And so making those better choices. But it still brings us to the choice of the question of how much should we be drinking. And I do agree that if you can abstain from alcohol consumption, do so. If you are listening to this and you're under the age of 21 and you have never consumed a glass of alcohol in your life, why start? There's no need to really just jump in. A lot of people start drinking alcohol and get interested in alcohol because of the social peer pressures. And kind of, once you maybe taste it, you might start to enjoy certain aspects of it. And if you're enjoying it for the right reason, that's okay. But if you're enjoying it only because it's making you intoxicated and causing you to black out and those types of things, you need to stop. If you choose to consume alcohol, do so wisely and do it for the right reasons, and recognize that in no instance is drinking to intoxication going to have health benefits to you or be beneficial. It's going to counteract everything else that we've been talking about to do to age well. Now, again, if it's on occasion, you just happen to, maybe it's your birthday and your friends are buying you a few too many drinks and you take an Uber home, don't drink and drive, but it's that one occasion, it's once a year. It's probably not going to have tremendous negative effects. But the more often we do that, the more negative it's going to be on both our immune system, on our muscle function, on our cognitive capabilities, on our relationships, on our well-being, on, the list goes on and on. I mean, essentially, there is a inverse relationship between alcohol consumption and aging well. So if your alcohol consumption is going up, your capacity to age well is going to be diminished. And so abstinence is the best approach. Light to moderate is the second best approach, and avoid heavy alcohol consumption, even on just infrequent occasions. Any other final thoughts?
Just want everyone out there to age well and make good choices.
And I think that's one of the biggest themes that is coming through, at least for me in this podcast, is make the good choices to age well. We'll add to our summary of things that we should be doing to age well: maintain a healthy body weight, exercise, increase physical activity, eat a healthy diet, get regular sleep, and minimize alcohol consumption. And you will
age well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well. If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers.